Were so certain I was finished, so certain that when the call came from the hospital, they sat down at the kitchen table, my kitchen table, and started dividing things up before I had even drawn my last breath. But I wasn't gone, and what I left behind in that hospital room wasn't a body. It was a lesson they will spend the rest of their lives trying to forget. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. The pain hit me somewhere around the intersection of Maple and Route 9, just outside of Birmingham. One second I was driving home from the hardware store, a bag of wood screws on the passenger seat. Old gospel playing low on the radio. The next second, there were headlights filling my windshield from the wrong direction, a horn blaring, and then the world folded in on itself like a piece of paper being crumpled. I don't remember the impact. I don't remember the glass. I only remember the silence afterward and how strange it was, how complete, like someone had pressed a button and turned the volume off on everything. I woke up in a room that smelled like bleach and cold air. My mouth was dry. My left arm felt like it had been filled with concrete. There was a tube taped to the back of my hand, a monitor beeping somewhere to my right, and fluorescent lights above me that seemed brighter than anything I had ever seen in my life. I blinked. I blinked again. The ceiling came into focus, white and clean and indifferent. A nurse appeared in my peripheral vision. Young woman, maybe late 20s, moving with that calm efficiency nurses have, the kind that tells you they have seen worse than whatever you are going through right now. She noticed my eyes were open and leaned in slightly. "Mr. Okafor," she said, soft but clear, "you're at St. Vincent's. You've been in an accident. Can you tell me if you know your name?" "Isaiah," I said. My voice came out like gravel. "Isaiah Okafor." She smiled, made a note. "Good. That's good. The doctor will be with you shortly." I tried to get my bearings. My right knee throbbed. My chest felt bruised from the inside. I turned my head slowly and saw a table beside the bed, my wallet, my reading glasses, one arm bent at an angle, my phone, screen cracked clean across the middle, and my late wife Ruth's bracelet, the thin gold one she made me put in my pocket the morning she passed, because she said she didn't want to be buried with anything that belonged to the living. I had carried it every day for 4 years. Seeing it there on that table made something in my chest tighten that had nothing to do with the accident. The doctor came in about 10 minutes later. Dr. Hennessy, according to his badge, mid-50s, a little tired around the eyes, the kind of face that has delivered bad news often enough to have developed a particular kind of stillness. "Mr. Okafor, good to see you awake." He pulled a chair close and sat down, which I noticed. "Doctors were about to tell you something difficult. Always sit down. You sustained a significant impact, 2 cracked ribs, a hairline fracture in your left wrist, and some internal bruising we've been monitoring. You lost a fair amount of blood. We needed to get your levels up quickly." "Okay," I said. I was still processing. "My family. Did someone call my family?" He looked at the chart in his hands. "Just for a moment, but I caught it. We contacted your son," he said. "The number listed as your emergency contact, Lionel. That's my oldest." "Yes." He paused. Set the chart on his knee. "Mr. Okafor, I want to be straightforward with you because I think you're the kind of man who would want that." "I am," I said, though my stomach had already started to drop. "When we called your son, we explained the situation. We told him it was serious and that we needed family present." Dr. Hensey kept his voice even, but there was something careful in it, like someone walking across ice. "He said, and I'm paraphrasing, that you had insurance and that this was a matter for the hospital to handle." I stared at him. "We called a second time, about an hour later, when your pressure dropped. A woman answered. We believe it was your daughter, Simone. She said she couldn't get away." I heard the words. I understood the words, and then I lay there for a long moment while the monitor beeped and the fluorescent lights hummed, and something inside me quietly and irrevocably broke. Not the kind of breaking that makes noise, not rage, not crying, just a clean, silent fracture like ice splitting in January. Lionel, my son, who I had co-signed a car loan for when he was 22 and defaulted on it, and I paid every cent. Simone, my daughter, who I had helped move 3 times, including once across 2 state lines with a rented truck. I drove myself at 64 years old. They didn't come, I said. No, Dr. Hennessy said. I'm sorry. I turned my head toward the window. The glass was dark, nighttime outside, and I could see a faint reflection of the room in the pane. The man lying in the bed looked older than I remembered. He looked tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. Thank you for telling me, I said. Can you give me a few minutes? He nodded, stood, and left without another word. Alone, I reached out with my right hand and picked up Ruth's bracelet from the table. The gold was warm, the way gold always stays warm against skin even after it's been set down. I turned it over in my fingers. There was a small nick in the clasp from the time she caught it on a cabinet door, and we laughed about it for 10 minutes while she stood there holding her wrist out dramatically like she'd been wounded in battle. 41 years I had that woman beside me. 41 years of the realest partnership I have ever known. She had seen things clearly. Ruth had. Always. She used to say, Isaiah, you give and you give and you give, and one day you're going to have to decide whether you're giving out of love or out of fear. I never had a good answer for her. I used to think it didn't matter, as long as I was giving. Lying in that hospital bed, I started to understand what she meant. I thought about Lionel. I thought about the way he had started calling more often in the last year, asking questions about the house, about my finances, whether I had thought about the future. I had taken it as concern. That is what you do when you are a parent. You translate everything your children do into the most generous version of itself. But lying there with cracked ribs and a busted wrist, and the knowledge that my son had told the hospital I was not his problem, I started translating differently. I thought about Simone, the way she had started referring to the house as the property in conversation, the way she had asked casually, twice in the past 6 months, whether I had a will and whether it was updated. I had told her yes, of course, and changed the subject. I told myself she was just being practical. Children worry about these things. It's natural. It didn't feel natural anymore. My phone was cracked, but it still turned on. I held it above me with my good hand, the light of the screen too bright in the dark room, and I scrolled to a name I hadn't called in 3 months. Arthur, my oldest friend, going back to when we were both young men working at the same plant in the early 80s, 2 guys who had nothing but thought they had everything. Arthur had become a real estate attorney over the years, night school, decade of studying while working days, the kind of discipline that made you respect a man completely. He picked up on the 3rd ring. Isaiah. His voice was surprised but steady. Arthur was always steady. It's late. What's wrong? I'm in the hospital, I said. St. Vincent's, car accident. I'm going to be all right. But Art, I need you to come see me when you can. There are some things I need to handle. There was a pause, and I could hear him reading between the lines the way old friends do. The kids didn't show, he said. It wasn't a question. No. I'll be there tomorrow morning, he said. Get some sleep. I set the phone down on my chest. Outside, a light rain had started tapping against the window glass in an uneven rhythm. I closed my eyes and did not sleep for a long time. Arthur arrived the next morning at 8, still in his coat, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the place down the block, because he knew hospital coffee was an insult to the concept. He pulled a chair up beside the bed and handed me a cup and looked at me the way a person looks at someone they have known for 40 years, not with pity, but with a clear-eyed, unflinching kind of recognition. Tell me everything, he said. I told him. The accident, the call to Lionel, the call to Simone, Dr. Hensey sitting down in that chair with the careful face. Arthur listened without interrupting, turning his coffee cup slowly in his hands. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. How long have you been carrying both of them? He asked. I thought about it. Lionel's car loan, Simone's moving cost, the money I had loaned Lionel 3 years ago to avoid an eviction, a loan he had never mentioned again, the tuition payments for Simone's youngest, which I had offered and which she had accepted without a word of hesitation, the phone bills, the birthday checks, the groceries I dropped off when either of them had a hard month. Long time, I said. Arthur nodded slowly. Isaiah, they're already talking to people. I have a contact at a firm across town. Lionel reached out 2 days ago asking about estate law. The coffee cup was warm in my hand. I set it down carefully on the tray table. 2 days ago, I had been in this room for 3 days, which meant within 24 hours of the accident, my son had called a lawyer. Not to ask whether I was alive, to ask about what would happen if I wasn't. I felt something settle in me. Not anger. Anger is hot and loud and burns itself out. This was something colder and quieter. A decision. What do I need to do? I asked. Arthur opened his briefcase. He had brought paperwork already, which told me he had been thinking about this longer than one night. First, we update the will. Full revision. We also look at the deed on the house. I want to make sure it's structured the way you actually want it, not the way it was set up 40 years ago when your circumstances were different. And we talk about what you want the future to look like, who you want in it, what you want to build. I want to build something that matters, I said, something that lasts. He looked at me over the rim of his glasses. Then let's get started. We talked for 2 hours. By the time he left, I had a list and a plan and the first clear sense of direction I had felt in longer than I could honestly account for. The room felt different after he left. Less like a place where things had been done to me, and more like a place where I had made a choice. My phone buzzed that afternoon. Simone. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then answered, "Daddy." Her voice was smooth, careful, tuned to a frequency she used when she wanted something. I knew that voice. I had been pretending for years that I didn't. "I heard you were in an accident. I've been so worried. How are you feeling?" "You heard," I said. "The hospital called you 3 days ago." A brief pause. "It's been so hectic. The kids have been sick, and Marcus had his work thing, and I couldn't get away. You know how it is." "I know exactly how it is," I said. "But I'm coming now. I'll be there this evening. And Lionel's coming too. We just want to see you, make sure you're okay." I looked out the window. A crow was sitting on the ledge outside, perfectly still, watching nothing in particular. "You don't need to come," I said. Another pause, longer this time. "Daddy, of course we're coming. You're our father." "I know what I am," I said, "and I'm starting to understand what you are, too." "Don't come, Simone. I mean that." I ended the call and set the phone face down on the tray table. My heart was beating quickly, the way it does when you do something that cannot be undone. I breathed through it. I thought about Ruth. I thought about the way she used to say, "Isaiah, the hardest thing in the world is to love someone clearly, to see them for exactly who they are, and love them without flinching and without lying to yourself about what you see." I had been lying to myself for a long time. They came anyway, of course. 2 days later, the day before my discharge, I heard them in the hall before I saw them. Lionel's voice low and controlled the way it gets when he is performing calmness. Simone's quick footsteps. The door opened, and there they were, my 2 children, standing in the doorway of my hospital room with flowers from the lobby gift shop and expressions calibrated for sympathy. I looked at them. I looked at them the way you look at something once you have stopped pretending, and it was strange. They were the same people they had always been. Nothing had changed about their faces, but I was seeing them differently, the way you see a painting differently, once someone tells you what was actually happening in it. "Dad," Lionel said, stepping in. "We came as soon as we could." "Lionel," I said, "the hospital called you the night of the accident. It took you 5 days." He opened his mouth, closed it. Simone came and sat in the chair beside the bed, reaching for my hand. I let her take it. "We're here now," she said softly. "That's what matters. We love you. We've been sick with worry." "No," I said, "you haven't." She looked at me. There was a flicker of something behind her eyes, surprise maybe, or recalculation. I had never spoken to her like that. Not once in 66 years of being her father. "Arthur came to see me," I said. "He told me Lionel called an estate law firm 2 days after the accident." The room went very quiet. That's not what it sounds like, Lionel said. I was just being responsible, making sure things were in order in case I didn't make it, I said. And you called them before you called me, before you came to see if I was alive. He had no answer for that. Neither did Simone. I had lived my whole adult life trying to hold this family together, trying to be the kind of father who showed up, who provided, who put everyone else first. I had poured myself into these two people like water into sand, watching it disappear, always assuming that love worked that way, that you gave, and eventually it filled something up. But it doesn't work that way. Sand doesn't fill, it just takes. I love you both, I said. I will always love you. That is not something that changes. I paused, looking from one face to the other. But I am not going to keep funding lives you refuse to take responsibility for. And I am not going to leave you anything that you have not earned simply because you are my children. I have spent a lot of time in this room, and I have thought carefully about what I want to do with what I have built. I've made my decisions. Arthur has the paperwork. Simone's voice dropped to something quieter, harder. What does that mean? What did you do? It means I am choosing what my life's work goes toward, I said, and I have chosen well. Lionel stood there for a moment longer. Then he turned and walked out. I heard his footsteps in the hall, fast and angry, and then the elevator. Simone stayed a moment longer, looking at me with an expression I could not fully read, not grief, not guilt, something more complicated than either. Then she stood, set the flowers on the windowsill, and followed her brother. The room was quiet again. I exhaled slowly and looked at the flowers, carnations from the gift shop, white and slightly wilted, bought in a hurry by people who had not known what else to bring. I was discharged the following morning. Arthur picked me up. We drove across town to his office, which smelled like coffee and old books in a way that had always seemed exactly right to me, and we sat in the leather chairs across from his desk and went through everything one more time. The will, revised and notarized. The deed, restructured. A conversation I had been wanting to have for 2 years, ever since I had driven past the community center on Faro Street and noticed the sign out front saying the building needed a new roof and new windows, and that donations were being accepted by the church that ran it. Ruth had volunteered there for 11 years. She had taught reading to adults on Tuesday evenings and never missed a session even when she was sick, even when she was tired, because she said some things you just showed up for no matter what. I signed the papers. The building on Faro Street was going to get its new roof. It was going to get new windows. There was going to be a reading room named for Ruth, with good lighting and comfortable chairs and enough books to take a person anywhere they wanted to go. And there was going to be a small endowment for the Tuesday evening program, so it could keep running long after I was gone. Arthur looked across the desk at me when we were done. "How do you feel?" he asked. I thought about it honestly, the way you think about things when you stop performing and just check in with yourself. "Like I can breathe," I said. He nodded. "Ruth would have liked this." "She would have said it was about time," I said. "And she would have been right." He laughed, the real kind, and so did I, and it felt like something opening up after a long time closed. We went to the diner 2 blocks over afterward, the one that has been there since 1974 and still makes their pie from scratch. I had the coffee and the pecan pie and sat by the window and watched the street for a while. Birmingham on a Thursday afternoon, people going about their lives, a woman pushing a stroller, a man arguing pleasantly with a parking meter, 2 teenagers sharing earphones outside the record shop. My phone had 3 missed calls from Lionel and 2 texts from Simone. I read the texts. The first one said, "You're making a mistake." The second one said, "We're your family, Dad. You can't just cut us out." I thought about responding for a moment. Then I thought about what I actually wanted to say and whether saying it would help anything, and I decided it wouldn't. Not right now. Maybe not ever. I pulled my wallet from my jacket pocket and opened it. Behind my insurance card there was a photograph, small and creased down the middle from years of being folded. Lionel at maybe 9 years old. Simone at 7. The two of them in the backyard of the old house on Clement Drive with Ruth and me, the four of us squinting into the summer sun. Ruth is laughing in the picture. She is always laughing in every photograph we ever took. I am holding Simone on my hip, and Lionel is pulling at my sleeve, and I am looking at Ruth, and the expression on my face is the expression of a man who has everything he needs. I kept looking at the photograph for a long moment. Then I tucked it back behind the insurance card and closed the wallet. Those people in the photograph were real. That afternoon in the backyard was real. Whatever came after, the entitlement, the coldness, the lawyer called before the father, that was real too. Both things are true. Both things can be true at the same time, and you can love the first truth and grieve it and still hold yourself accountable to the second one. That is not coldness. That is clarity. The pie was good. The coffee was better than the hospital. Outside, the light was doing that thing it does in late afternoon in Alabama, going golden and long across the pavement, making everything look briefly like something worth painting. I had work to do. There were contractors to call about Faro Street, and a conversation to have with the pastor at Ruth's church, and a whole life still ahead of me that I had been too distracted to properly inhabit. I wasn't starting over. I was just starting correctly, maybe for the first time. I left a good tip and walked out into the afternoon light, and for the first time in a long time, the walk felt like it was going somewhere. Thank you for listening. If this story reached you today, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I read every single one. And if any part of what I shared here speaks to something you've been carrying, I hope it helps you set it down. Don't forget to subscribe to Voices of Uncle Walter and share this with someone who needs to hear it. I have thought about this a lot since I walked out of that hospital. Not with bitterness, I want to be clear about that, but with the kind of honest, unhurried thinking you can only do once the noise settles down and you stop pretending things are other than what they are. Here is what I know. What happened to me did not come out of nowhere. It built itself slowly, over years, out of 100 small choices I made without realizing I was making them. Every time I said yes when I should have said, let's talk about this. Every time I handed over money without asking whether it was helping or just postponing. Every time I looked at my son's face or my daughter's face and translated what I saw into something more comfortable than the truth. I built that situation the same way you build anything, one layer at a time, each one resting on the one before it. That is not me punishing myself. That is just me being honest about cause and effect. Lionel did not become the man who called an estate lawyer before he called his injured father in a single day. That took years of being shown that there were no real consequences, that the door would always be open, that the check would always come. I taught him that not on purpose, not with any cruelty, but I taught it to him all the same, and Simone learned it right beside him. We pass things down to our children, whether we mean to or not. The question is what we are actually passing. What I want to say to anyone watching this, anyone who recognizes something in this story, is that it is never too late to change what you are teaching. Not to your children, not to the people around you, not to yourself. I was 66 years old, lying in a hospital bed with cracked ribs and a busted wrist, before I finally got honest about what I had been doing. 66, and it was still not too late. The hardest part was not cutting off the money or changing the will or any of the practical things Arthur helped me with. The hardest part was sitting with the grief of it. Because I did grieve. I looked at that old photograph of Lionel and Simone in the backyard on Clement Drive, those two little kids squinting into the Alabama sun, and I grieved the distance between who they were in that picture and who they had become. That grief is real. It deserves to be felt, not pushed down, not explained away. But grief is not the same as surrender. You can carry it and still keep walking. What I built on Faro Street, that reading room with Ruth's name on the door, the Tuesday evening program she gave 11 years of her life to, that is what happens when a person stops pouring themselves into sand and starts building on solid ground instead. That is what I mean by intelligence, not cleverness, not strategy, but the willingness to see clearly and act accordingly, even when it costs you something you loved. And the resilience. That was Ruth's gift to me, honestly. She modeled it every Tuesday evening when she showed up tired and showed up anyway, because she said some things you just do no matter what. I am trying to be worthy of that example. Some days I am better at it than others, but I am still here. I am still trying. That is enough for now.